A business owner spent 20 years building a company worth $5 million. Found a buyer, agreed on a price. 2 weeks before the closing, the deal was dead. Not because the buyer changed their mind, because of one mistake the seller made 1 year before the sale even started. The mistake wasn't the price, it wasn't a negotiation, it was who they hired to get the company ready for a sale. The person they hired didn't have the experience with business sales, and the work they did looked fine on paper, but it created hidden tax problems inside the company. Nobody caught it until the buyer's team did. By the way, I'm Jaggi. I'm a Canadian CPA and a tax advisor with over 15 years of experience in this space. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened in that deal, and I'll walk you through 5 stages of business sale where having the wrong people around you cost you money, or sometimes even kill the deal entirely. If you saw my last video, I broke down how a business owner lost $800,000 in tax on a $3 million sale. Money or tax that should have been close to zero. Every one of these mistakes come back to the same thing. Wrong people doing the wrong job. Today, I'll show you exactly how that plays out in this case, starting with the deal that died. Here's what happened. I was representing the buyer on the deal. The seller had built a solid business, profitable, well-run, worth every dollar of that $5 million offer. And 1 year before putting the company up for sale, the seller did something smart. They hired someone to clean up the company. What does that mean? Think of it like selling a house. Before you sell a house, you renovate. You pull out the old carpets, you fix the bathroom, clean out the garage. You want to make sure the house looks at its best when the buyers walk through it. Same idea with the business. Before you sell, you clean it all up. You pull out the personal stuff, investments, GICs, real estate, anything that's not part of the actual business. So when a buyer looks at the company, all they see is a clean, well-run operation. And that's exactly what this seller did. They hired their accountant to pull out all the non-business stuff and separate it from an operating company. The idea was right, but the execution was the problem here. The accountant who did this work was good at what they do. Filing tax returns, preparing financial statements, bookkeeping, year-end filings, the day-to-day stuff. But they were not experienced in preparing a company for a sale. And the way they separated those assets created the problem. Instead of cleanly separating the business from the personal stuff, the way it was done created layers of tax inside the company. The same pool of money was now going to be taxed more than once. Think of it this way. Imagine you have $100 in a jar. In a clean structure, you take the $100 out, pay the tax on it once, and you're done. But because of how this was set up, CRA could come back and say, actually, you owe tax on the $100 here, here, and here. Same $100, 2 or 3 tax bills stacked on top of each other. And nobody knew. The seller didn't know. The accountant who did the work didn't realize it. It looked fine on paper, but underneath there was a tax problem sitting inside the company like a ticking time bomb. Then my client, the buyer, hired me to check the company's tax history before closing. This is called a due diligence process. Think of it like a home inspection. Imagine you're buying a house. You hire the inspector, and the inspector finds a crack in the foundation you didn't know about as a seller. Now you've got 3 options. Either you lower the price, or you hold back the money until the problem has been fixed, or you walk away. And that's exactly what happens in a business sale when a buyer's tax team finds a problem. So we found this massive problem. We told the seller there's a serious tax risk inside this company. If CRA ever to come back and reassess it, there will be an enormous tax bill. So we said the only way you should do this deal is if you hold back about 1/3 of the purchase price, and the money will sit in the lawyer's trust account. If CRA doesn't come after it, then we release that money back to the seller after 3 years. On a $5 million deal, that's nearly $2 million that seller cannot touch. And why did the money have to sit there? Because CRA still had time on the clock. The cleanup was done a year before, the tax returns were filed, and after that, CRA has up to 3 years to come back and say, we don't agree with what you did. Until that window closes, the risk is live. Nobody agreed to the holdback we suggested. The sellers couldn't accept losing access to $2 million for 3 years. The buyers couldn't take the risk without it. 2 weeks before the closing, the deal was dead. Months of negotiation, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees. A buyer and seller who both wanted this deal done, gone, because the person who cleaned up the company earlier was not experienced enough to get it done right the first time. And that's the one mistake. Not the seller, not the buyer, not the business. The seller hired someone they trusted to do the work that person had never done before, and nobody caught it until it was too late. Look, this is the pattern that I see in deal after deal, and I want to show you exactly where in a business sale this goes wrong, because it's not just one moment. It can happen in any stage of the sale. Stage 1, pre-sale planning. This is everything that happens before a buyer even shows up, and this is where the biggest savings are. The deal I just told you about, that's a stage 1 failure. The seller cleaned up the company, great idea, but the person who did it had never done it before, and the mistakes just sat there. Your regular accountant, the one who does your year-end, your tax returns, your HST, they probably haven't done this type of cleanup for a sale before. They haven't set up the structures that let you use your family's multiple exemptions. These aren't things that come up for their day-to-day work, and that's fine. That's not a knock on them. Most business owners only sell once or twice in their lifetime. Their accountant may not have worked through a deal before either. But if nobody on your team knows how to do these things 1 to 2 years before the sale, you lose options you did not even know about. And by the time you find out, it is just too late. Stage 2, the letter of intent, or we call it for short, LOI. This is a handshake document. It sets the price, the structure, the conditions, and the timeline for closing. In few of the deals, the letter of intent can be drafted by a business broker. They use standard language. Look, brokers are great at finding deals and negotiating prices, but the LOI is where important tax terms either get locked in or get left out entirely. Here's an example. You sign a non-compete saying you agree not to work in the same industry for 5 years. Sounds like a great business term, but the CRA can look at that non-compete and say, look, the part of the money you received as payment for not competing, that gets taxed at a higher rate and can be up to 54% sometimes than the rest of the sale. If nobody flags that at the LOI stage, it gets baked into the deal. And sometimes I see these things more than you think. The LOI is already signed before a tax advisor even gets a call. Now I'm reading it, finding things that should have been in there. And now we have to fight them to get them in there in the final agreement later. It's harder, it can cost more money, and sometimes the buyer just won't agree. Stage 3, due diligence. This is the home inspection. The buyer sends in their team to go through everything, your financials, your tax returns, your corporate records. They're looking for risks. And here's the gap between teams become very obvious. The buyer's team on a serious deal usually includes people who do this thing for a living. They have been through dozens of transactions before, and they know exactly what to look for. And that's how we had found the hidden tax problem in the $5 million deal. We'd seen that kind of thing before. And when there's gap like that, the buyer has all the leverage. They can demand holdbacks, price reductions, or even walk away entirely. The seller isn't leading, they are reacting. Stage 4, the share purchase agreement. This is when the final purchase agreement gets drafted. A lot of people think the deal is done at this point. The price is agreed, the handshake has happened, now it's just paperwork. It is not just paperwork. The agreement has promises in it. Promises you're making to the buyer about the tax history of your company. If CRA comes back after the sale and finds a problem, these promises determine who pays for them, you or the buyer. If your lawyer isn't experienced with business sales, they might not push back on promises they're making that are too broad. I have seen sellers agree on things without understanding what they signed. 2 years later, CRA reassesses something and the seller is writing a check because nobody limited those promises. And here's the other thing. Your tax advisor and your lawyer need to talk to each other directly on this, not through you. When the tax person reviews the agreement for tax language and the lawyer handles the legal protection, they need to be coordinating. And when they're not, things will fall through the cracks. Stage 5. After the sale. Look, the deal is done, the money is in your bank account, you think it's over. Sometimes it is not over. CRA has years to review the transaction. They can challenge the deal structure. They can reclassify how the parts of purchase price were treated, like the non-compete I spoke about, and sends you a higher tax bill. And here's the part that really hurts. When you sell, you don't own the company anymore. If the CRA goes to the buyer with questions about the time when you ran the company, you need purchase agreement to give you the right to be involved in that CRA audit. If that wasn't negotiated before the closing, you have no seat at the table. Look, I want to be clear about something. I am not saying your accountant is the problem. Every deal I work on, the accountant is part of the team. They have to be. They know the company better than anybody else. They have the history, the numbers, the relationship. You simply need them. The issue is the roles. Most business owners sell once, maybe twice in their entire life. So they naturally lean on people they already trust. And that makes perfect sense. But a business sale needs a specific set of skills that most accountant and some lawyers don't usually use in their day-to-day practice. It is not just what they do. And honestly, it is not fair to put your accountant in that position, expecting them to handle deal-level tax planning when they may not have done these things and they're now set up for failure. The best accountants I work with know this. They'll tell you straight up, this is outside of my area. Let me bring someone who does deals. That's not weakness. That's exactly what you want to hear. So, if you're planning to sell in the next few years, here's how to set up a team. You need 3 people in addition to your existing accountant: a tax advisor who does deals, a lawyer who does deals, and your broker or investment banker to run the process. And the most important part, they need to be able to talk to each other directly, not through you. The tax advisor and the lawyer need to be on the same calls, looking at the same documents, coordinating timelines together. Now, how do you know if somebody's right fit for you? Ask them these 3 questions. Question 1, how many business sales have you done in the last 2 years? If the answer is 0 or 1, they're learning on your deal. You don't want that. Question 2, have you ever cleaned up a company before a sale, set up structures, separated assets, done pre-sale prep work? If they hesitate, that tells you everything. Question 3 to ask them, can you explain the tax difference between selling the assets of a company versus the shares? If they can't explain it in plain language, they're not ready to lead your deal. If they can't answer all 3 questions with confidence, they're probably great at what they do, but this isn't it. The cost of the wrong team isn't always a number you can point to. Sometimes it's $800,000 in avoidable tax, like the owner I talked about in my last week's video. Sometimes it is $5 million deal that dies 2 weeks before closing. But sometimes the cost is something you'll never see. It's the planning that never happened, the exemptions no one told you about, the cleanup that should have happened 2 years ago. And that's the real cost. It is not just what you lose, it's what you never had the chance to keep. I put together a deal team checklist. It has 3 questions I just gave you, plus a breakdown of who should be in each role, when to bring them in, and what to look for. Download it for free on theadvisorstable.com. The link is in the description. And next week, I am flipping the perspective. I'll show you exactly what the buyer's tax team looks before every deal. The process that killed the $5 million deal, I'll walk you through it step by step, so you know what's coming before the buyer does. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.